First class? The attendant's laugh was thin, sharp. Oh no, sweetheart, these seats aren't for people like you. A couple across the aisle looked up from their champagne, amused. One man muttered in Arabic, not caring if she understood. They let anyone in these days. Soon they'll be serving us in here too. Laughter rippled. Soft, expensive, cruel. The black woman in 2A didn't move. She sat upright, navy blazer pressed, posture unbroken. She closed her book with quiet precision and set it on the tray as if placing a stone on still water. Boarding pass, the attendant said, palm open but tilted downward, like a scale already judging the weight. The woman reached into her tote, drew out the pass, and placed it in that waiting hand. No rush, no apology. The attendant skimmed it. Seat 2A, first class. Her smile faltered by a hair, then snapped back into place. Clerical error, she declared brightly. It happens. Don't get too comfortable. These seats cost more than your yearly salary. A businessman in 1C smirked without turning. Maybe she's a social experiment, he said to his companion. Diversity at 30,000 feet. Another voice, a little farther back. Or a charity upgrade. More laughter. It filled the narrow cabin like a fog machine, artificial, choking, meant to hide everything that mattered. The woman still said nothing. She straightened the corner of the napkin on her armrest. The movement was small, exact. Her silence wasn't a retreat. It was a fuse waiting for a match. Ma'am, the attendant said, sharper now, please stand. We'll find your correct seat in economy. The woman's eyes met hers at last, calm, too calm. My seat is here, she said. A hush slid along the aisle. It wasn't agreement. It was curiosity sharpening its knife. In what world? The attendant asked, leaning in. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. In the world printed on the ticket you're holding, the woman replied. The attendant's cheeks colored, then cooled. Security will meet us at the gate if this continues. A chorus of seatbelts clicked. Not because of safety, because people were settling in to watch. Show some gratitude, the man in 1C added lazily. You gotta sit in first for 5 minutes. That's a story for your followers, I'm sure. A younger woman across the aisle, oversized headphones around her neck, glanced between them with a wince. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Silence is easier than courage. It costs less in the moment. The attendant angled herself so her body blocked the view from the galley. Listen, she said, voice low. I'm trying to be kind. Move, or I'll move you. The woman didn't raise her voice. Do not put your hands on me, a beat. The attendant's smile dropped. Stand up. When the woman reached for her tote again, the attendant seized the movement for defiance. Her hand came down against the woman's forearm, a sharp, impatient smack meant to jolt, meant to remind, meant to put her back in place. It wasn't loud, but in the pressurized hush of first class, it cracked like thunder, gasps. A crystal flute tipped and shattered. Someone whispered, "Did she just—" Someone else hissed, "Don't get involved." The couple with champagne stared at the ceiling, faces blank with the discipline of people who cannot afford to see. The woman did not flinch. She turned her head. The world narrowed to 2 faces and the piece of air between them. Do you even know, she asked softly, who you're touching? The attendant blinked. The question didn't fit into her script. A disruptive passenger, she said too fast. That's who. The woman's gaze didn't waver. Try again. A rustle traveled down the cabin, the restless sound of people adjusting postures without standing up for anything. The attendant looked over her shoulder for help and found only eyes. No crew came forward. No one wanted this on their uniform. I'm done with this, the man in 1C announced, twisting around. He wore a perfect tie and a smirk curated over years. If she can sit here, then what exactly did I pay for? An exit, the woman said, still looking only at the attendant. Use it at your leisure. A few breathy laughs escaped and died. Humor, when it drifted to her side, felt dangerous to keep. Enough, the attendant snapped. Give me your ID. No, the woman said. You're refusing a lawful request. I'm refusing your unlawful hand. The words hung, precise as a level. Somewhere in the back, a phone camera rose behind a sleeve. The attendant flicked the boarding pass like it was contaminated. "I don't know how you got this," she said. "But you don't belong in this cabin." The woman's breath moved in and out, even as a metronome. "You keep using that word," she said. "Belong." "Because you don't," the attendant returned. "Because you can't imagine that I do." A flight purser peered from the galley, weighing storms. She did not intervene. "Leadership often looks like distance at first glance." "Ma'am," a new voice came, soft, uncertain. A teenage boy in streetwear leaned into the aisle. "Do you need help?" His mother tugged him back, eyes warning. "Not here, not us, not now." The woman flicked him a glance, a tiny nod that contained gratitude and a permission slip to remain safe. The boy sat, fists tight. "Last chance," the attendant said. "Stand or I call the gate." "Call them," the woman said. "Call the pilot." "Call the sky while you're at it." "Threats won't work here," the attendant said, but the line trembled in her mouth. "Neither will you," the woman replied. The man in 1C snorted. "She's enjoying this." "Look at her, calm as you like. She knows we won't do anything." "Interesting," the woman said. "You're admitting you could." "That's not what that you choose not to," she continued, "until someone like me touches your sense of order." "What is that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "It means your comfort costs," she said. "You just never read the bill." The attendant tried to reset the balance with theatrics. She raised her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor seating issue. We'll be departing shortly." A murmur swelled. People craned their necks, phones a little higher now. Bravery outsourced to glass and algorithms. "Ma'am," the attendant said through teeth, "hand me any government identification." The woman reached for her tote again, unhurried. She drew out a leather case, the navy so dark it drank the cabin light. She did not open it. She set it on her tray, fingertips resting on top. "Apologize," the attendant said, startled that her voice could still assemble the word. "For your tone, for this disturbance." The woman's hand left the case. She folded it over the other, the way speakers do when they are about to make rooms listen whether rooms wish to or not. But she did not speak. Silence spread, heavy and expectant. "You think this is dramatic?" Once said. "Wait until you're escorted off in handcuffs. Some of us have calls to make." "Make them," she said. "I'll wait." The attendant's eyes slid to the case again, then back to the woman's face. "What are you?" she asked, trying for a different word and landing on a worse one. "Who?" "Someone you assumed would be grateful to be asked the wrong questions," the woman said. "You people always play the victim. And you people always confuse power with permission." A hiss. A gasp. The line had teeth on both ends now. "Stop filming!" the attendant barked. "It's against policy." "It's not," a calm voice replied from row 3. A man in a navy suit who hadn't uttered a syllable until this moment looked up from his laptop. "There's no expectation of privacy in a public cabin. And I'd advise caution for your own sake." "Who are you?" she demanded. "Someone who writes policies you've never read." The woman in 2A turned her head, just enough to acknowledge the man with a glance that said, "Not yet." He understood, and returned to his keyboard like a soldier she had dismissed. "Enough," the attendant repeated, pulled back to the script that had failed her from the first line. "Stand up." The woman's hand slid the case an inch closer to the aisle. She still didn't open it. "Do you even know?" she asked again, softer now. "Who you're touching?" The attendant's mouth opened, closed. "A problem. A mirror," the woman said. "Look carefully." Something changed behind the attendant's eyes, a flicker of recognition that felt too late to be useful. She glanced around and found no one willing to become her chorus. Even 1C, so sure a minute ago, was pretending to check his watch. The plane's door clanked. A ground agent had stepped in, paused, stepped out again. No one wanted to own the next move. "Apologize," 1C said suddenly to the woman, grabbing for the last comfort left to him. The idea that his request still mattered. "End this." "No," she said. "To her, then," he told the attendant, desperate enough to share. "Everyone's filming?" The attendant's nostrils flared. "I will not apologize to someone who lied their way into—" She stopped. 2 rows back, a little girl had stood up on her seat. She wore braids and wonder. "She didn't lie," the girl announced in the clean, defiant voice children save for the truth. "You're being mean." Her father tugged her down gently, mortified and proud at the same time. The cabin, which had been a courtroom with laughter for gavel, felt suddenly like a classroom that had found its teacher. The woman looked at the girl and gave the smallest smile, a promise that the world could yet be instructed. The attendant swallowed. She reached for the call button, missed it, pressed it on the second try. A soft chime pinged overhead like a timid bell. From the galley, the purser emerged fully now, spine straight, face composed in the style of people trained to resolve conflict without becoming the subject of it. "What's the issue?" she asked, voice pitched to carry only as far as it needed. "Fraudulent ticket," the attendant said quickly. "Non-compliant passenger. Refused to move. Struck me." A wash of disbelief moved through the cabin like wind through tall grass. Even silence makes a sound when it's unanimous. The purser's eyes went from the attendant's unmarked arm to the woman's steady hands. "Ma'am," she said to 2A, tone neutral. "I am in my seat," the woman said. "She struck me, and she demanded I stand because she cannot imagine me here." "Do you have identification?" the purser asked, the way people ask for rain in a drought, only if it comes easily. "I do," the woman said, fingers resting on the case. "I also have a question." The purser lifted her chin, granting the space. "Yes." "How many times today?" the woman asked. "Have you explained to a man where the lavatory is without implying he cannot read the sign?" The purser's eyes flickered. A muscle in her jaw moved like a nod it wasn't safe to make. "Will you show me your ID?" "Yes," the woman said, and didn't. "Not yet." "Now she's playing games," the attendant said, relieved to find a familiar accusation. "We don't have time for theatrics." "You had time for humiliation," the woman said. "Make time for repair, a beat." The purser didn't flinch. Good leaders don't blink at the truth. They blink at the clock. "Captain is asking if we can close the door," she said into her shoulder mic. "Stand by." The attendant took a half step toward the woman, reclaiming inches, if not authority. "Hand it over," she said. "No," the woman said, and nudged the case a fraction closer to the aisle, an inch of gravity, a hint of thunder on the horizon. "Not to you. Why not?" the attendant challenged. "Because you asked with your hand before you asked with your mouth." The purser's gaze sharpened. "That true?" she asked quietly. The attendant's face flickered again. She was being non-compliant. "That's not what I asked," the purser said. "It doesn't matter," 1C offered, desperate to be helpful to the side he'd picked. "The point, the woman said, is about to introduce itself." She lifted the case. She held it in her palm, not opening, just letting its presence speak the preface. Phones rose higher. The girl in braids peered over the seatback as if watching a door about to appear where wall had always been. The purser inhaled, prepared to see something she had not foreseen, because foreseeing it would have required believing in someone she had been taught not to expect. The attendant folded her arms again, a fortress of crossed wrists. "Whatever that is," she said, brittle as plastic. "It doesn't change policy." The woman finally looked away from her and through her, to the aisle. The passengers, the witnesses who would have to decide what they'd seen. She spoke so quietly the cabin had to lean forward to hear. "You wanted a place," she said. "You insisted on one. Remember this moment when you learn mine." She pressed her thumb against the case's clasp. A hush fell. Different from the earlier silences, this one warm with anticipation, cruel with curiosity, primed like a stage right before the curtain lifts. Somewhere behind them, the jetway door thudded. A ground agent cleared his throat and went still, as if he'd stepped into a story and did not know his line. The woman looked up. Eyes bright, voice steady. "Do you even know?" she asked one last time. "Who you're touching?" The case opened with a soft click, and the screen of the nearest phone reflected the gold of a crest none of them were ready to see. The clasp clicked. It was a small sound, but in the silence of first class it rang like thunder. Every head turned. Every phone inched higher, cameras trying to catch a moment they already sensed would be bigger than the flight itself. From the dark leather case, a glint of embossed gold caught the light. Not a credit card, not a frequent flyer tag. Something heavier, something official. The purser froze mid-step. She had seen hundreds of IDs, thousands of passports, but this was different. The woman in 2A didn't rush. She let them wait, let the anticipation coil tighter. She turned the passport over, revealing the crest pressed deep into its cover. The attendant's smirk finally cracked. Her eyes darted across the emblem, recognition flickering and then hardening into denial. Passengers whispered, "Is that?" "No, it can't be." "Wait, she's—" Naomi Richardson finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was iron in it, the kind that doesn't bend. "I am Ambassador Naomi Richardson, United Nations delegate, scheduled keynote at tomorrow's Geneva summit." The words landed heavier than the slap had. The cabin went still, stunned into disbelief. The businessman in 1C, the loudest mocker, the one who had joked about diversity experiments, nearly dropped his glass. His smirk collapsed into something pale, something human. The attendant opened her mouth, then shut it. Opened again, as if language itself had fled from her. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "You struck me. You mocked me. You assumed I could not belong. And you did it loudly, because cruelty is braver when it thinks no one important is listening." Her words cut the air like glass. Phones trembled in passengers' hands. Not because of turbulence, but because the weight of what they were capturing made their palms sweat. The attendant stammered. Her face was tight, her uniform suddenly too small. "I didn't know." "That's the problem," Naomi said, her voice steady, unflinching. "You never ask. You never wait. You assume?" The purser stepped closer now, her face carefully professional, but her tone softer, almost reverent. "Madam Ambassador?" "On behalf of the airline?" "No," Naomi interrupted, gently but firmly. "Not on behalf. Not in general. Her." Every eye turned back to the attendant. The attendant's lips quivered. She was used to controlling the cabin, to being the authority between the aisles. Now the aisles themselves had turned into a courtroom, and she stood at the center, guilty without needing a trial. "Say it," Naomi said. The silence stretched. The only sound was the soft hum of the aircraft's engines, suddenly too loud. Finally, the word broke free. "I apologize. Louder," Naomi said. The attendant swallowed hard. "I apologize. I was wrong." A ripple went through the passengers. Some nodded slightly, almost unconsciously. The girl in braids from row 4 leaned forward again, her eyes wide and shining. For her, this wasn't just an apology. It was proof. Proof that truth could stand taller than insult. Proof that dignity could win without shouting. Naomi turned her gaze across the cabin now, sweeping each face like a judge recording testimony. "You've seen it," she said. Her tone wasn't angry, it was heavier. How quickly dignity is questioned. How easily arrogance laughs. How silence agrees. 1C shifted in his seat, shame coloring his features. The woman in pearls who had whispered jokes into her husband's ear earlier lowered her eyes, her cheeks burning with heat that no air vent could cool. Her voice softened, almost to a whisper, but somehow every ear caught it. "Remember this. The next time you decide who belongs. The next time you measure someone's worth against the seat they're in, or the clothes they wear, or the color of their skin." She closed the passport case with a soft click. Not a slam, not a flourish, just finality, and that sound was louder than applause. The attendant sank back against the galley wall, her hands shaking, her authority cracked open. The businessman in 1C turned his face to the window, too ashamed to meet anyone's eyes. The purser, steady, professional, stood straighter than before, as though the cabin had just been transformed into a courtroom, and she had just been reminded of her role as witness. Naomi lifted her book again, opening it where she had left off, calm as though none of this had disturbed her, as though dignity itself had always been her traveling companion. But the rest of the cabin knew better. Nothing was the same anymore. The wheels screeched as the aircraft kissed the runway, but inside first class the silence was almost unbearable. It was the kind of silence that pressed against people's lungs, that made every heartbeat sound too loud in one's own ears. The passengers were still sitting stiff, their glasses untouched, their eyes downcast, because the words still lingered in the cabin like smoke after fire. "Do you even know who you're touching?" It had not been shouted. It had not been dramatic. Yet it was louder than anything else spoken that night. Naomi Richardson stood unhurried. She adjusted her coat with deliberate grace, gathered her bag, and stepped into the aisle. For a moment, her poise seemed to stretch the air itself, reminding everyone of the dignity they had tried to strip from her. Nobody stopped her. Nobody dared. The passengers who had mocked her now sat like statues. Their arrogance melted into something that tasted bitter in their throats. A businessman in 1C shifted uncomfortably, wanting to speak, to offer some excuse, but the words never came. He looked at his wedding ring instead, as if ashamed to let his own reflection meet his eyes. The woman in the champagne dress bit her lips so hard it turned white. She, who had laughed the loudest, now clutched her handbag like a shield, and then the phones began buzzing. Notifications, uploads. A dozen passengers had pressed record when the room shifted. Their shaky videos, already sent, were making their way to the world. Naomi hadn't raised her voice, but the echo of her words had just been set free into millions of ears. By the time Naomi stepped into the jet bridge, the clip was climbing its first 1,000 views. By the time she reached baggage claim, her name was on Twitter's trending list. And by the time her car door closed, the video had exploded past 1 million. It was raw, unpolished, shot at an angle that barely caught her face. But that made it real. The world saw the smirk on the attendant's face, the slap, the laughter of those in first class, and then the stillness, the quiet moment when Naomi turned and dropped her words like a verdict. "Do you even know who you're touching?" Twitter ignited. TikTok flooded with edits. Instagram stories blazed with screenshots. Hashtags were born in fire. Ambassador Naomi. First-class racism. Dignity speaks. Know Who You Touch celebrities reposted the clip with captions like, "Power, absolute power." Politicians weighed in. An incident like this reveals how prejudice lives in everyday spaces. Activists marched online and off, declaring, her silence spoke louder than their arrogance, but it wasn't just famous voices. It was ordinary ones. A teacher in Detroit wrote, "My students need to see this tomorrow." A woman in Lagos tweeted, "I've lived this." The way she stood, it gave me chills. A man in Cairo posted, "She spoke in our tongue better than the ones who mocked her." Stories flooded the internet. People who had been underestimated, belittled, dismissed, poured their memories into comment sections. Naomi's one sentence had become their collective anthem. Meanwhile, Alpine Airways staggered in panic. Their first statement read like something pulled from a dusty file. "We take this matter with the utmost seriousness." But it was hollow. Sponsors began to vanish. A women-led investment firm announced, "We will not partner with an airline that humiliates women of color in first class." Stock prices tumbled. News anchors speculated about resignations. On the second day, the CEO appeared on live television. His voice was tight, his eyes strained. "We unreservedly apologize to Madam Ambassador Richardson for her experience." But the apology fell into the void. Because the world had already seen, and once people see truth, no corporate script can bury it again. The attendant's name leaked. Her face was everywhere. She gave one interview sobbing, "I didn't know who she was." The internet tore the words apart. Respect shouldn't depend on a title. Maybe next time, don't slap anyone. You don't need to know who she is to know she deserves dignity. Within a week, she was dismissed. But her dismissal didn't silence the outrage. It became fuel. Her face turned into memes, into warning posters. Some cruel, some sharp, all unforgettable. Naomi, meanwhile, stayed silent. She declined every interview, ignored every headline. Paparazzi swarmed her hotel in Geneva, but she walked past them with the same calm she had carried on the plane. "I didn't do it to go viral," she told her aide. "I didn't do it to destroy anyone. I spoke because silence had already failed. The Geneva summit awaited. Naomi stepped onto its stage in a navy suit, her chin high, her eyes steady. Flashbulbs flashed like lightning. World leaders whispered in their seats. Her keynote had been written weeks earlier on the subject of diplomacy and language. But after the flight, it resonated differently. When you strip a person of dignity, she said, her voice clear as water, you strip yourself of humanity. And when you deny someone's belonging, you reveal the limits of your own imagination. There was no cough, no shuffle in the hall, just silence, the kind that listens. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunder. 72 hours later, a non-profit launched the Naomi Richardson Fellowship, dedicated to women of color entering diplomacy. Donations poured in, $2 million in a week, $10 million by the month's end. Universities played her speech in lecture halls. High school teachers replayed her video in classrooms. Children drew her in notebooks, sometimes in suits, sometimes in superhero capes, always standing tall in seat 2A. The teenager from row 4 wrote a post that captured hearts. I wanted to stand up, but she told me with her eyes it was okay to stay seated. That's leadership. That's strength. She gave me courage without saying a word. The little girl with braids became an icon. Her father posted a picture of her holding a cardboard sign. Dignity belongs everywhere. The phrase took on a life of its own. Protesters painted it on banners. Activists used it in speeches. Cafes taped it on walls. In Los Angeles, immigrant cooks hung it above their stove, next to a faded newspaper clipping of Naomi's face. The attendant's downfall continued. Hate mail mixed with regret. She issued a second apology, her voice breaking. I should have treated her with respect, regardless of who she was. I failed. Some forgave. Most did not. Naomi never mentioned her name again. She never weaponized her humiliation. When asked later, she said, her mistake was visible. But think of the invisible ones you commit every day. The ones with no cameras, no hashtags, no headlines. Correct those first. That sentence landed heavier than any video. The world went quiet. Weeks later, Naomi sat in a small cafe in Geneva. No cameras, no speeches, just the smell of roasted beans and the soft chatter of strangers. She sipped her coffee slowly, her shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. A little girl approached her table, clutching a notebook. Her hands trembled. Are you the lady who speaks all the languages? She whispered. Naomi smiled softly. Some of them. I want to be like you. Naomi leaned close, her voice tender. Then remember this, your worth isn't decided by the seat you're in. It's decided by the truth you carry when they try to move you. The girl's eyes glowed. She hugged her notebook as if it were a passport. Naomi leaned back, sipping her coffee with a smile no one else noticed, but it was there. The viral video eventually faded. New scandals replaced it, as they always do. But for those who had seen it, who had felt it, the lesson stayed. On planes, passengers softened their tones. In offices, managers thought twice before questioning who belonged. In classrooms, teachers retold the story of Ambassador Naomi Richardson, the woman who spoke calmly in the face of insult and changed the world without raising her voice, because sometimes dignity doesn't roar. It doesn't fight with fists or fire. It sits steady in a chair, silent but unshakable, and says one sentence that makes the world listen. And for Naomi Richardson, that sentence would echo forever. Do you even know who you're touching?